When Classroom of the Elite started blowing up on the internet, there was a very clear narrative: Ayanokoji's success was going to be temporary. He was a cold, calculated, emotionally empty character, and a lot of people thought that kind of character only worked because of the hype of the moment, that when the next popular anime came along, he'd disappear from the map like so many others do. And honestly, they had good reasons to think that. The anime was already playing on difficult ground, because cold and intelligent characters are nothing new in the industry. There are plenty of them. But what actually happened was the exact opposite of what everyone expected. Years passed. New seasons, new characters, new trends came and went. And Ayanokoji didn't disappear. Today, several years after the first season aired in 2017, he's still one of the most recognizable protagonists in modern anime. Not just among people who watched the show. Among people who've never even seen it. And that's something almost no other character from his generation managed to pull off. So what does Ayanokoji have that the others don't? The first important thing to understand is that Ayanokoji is independent from the series. That sounds strange at first, but it's the key to everything. There are characters that work within their own story, that mean nothing without the context of their anime. But then there are others who transcend that and become something bigger, a concept, an image, a symbol. And Ayanokoji landed in that second category. You could pull Ayanokoji out of Classroom of the Elite and the character would still work. He'd still carry weight, still have identity. That doesn't happen with 90% of anime protagonists. And the most concrete proof of that is that people who have never watched the anime know exactly who he is. They know he's the manipulator, the character you can't read, the one who's always 10 steps ahead. That doesn't need explanation or context because it's spread on its own. Through social media, through edits, through TikTok videos. And speaking of TikTok, from the moment the first season dropped, the character exploded in a way that very few shows ever achieve. Because it wasn't just popular within the fandom. It was popular outside of it. There were videos about how to have his IQ, how to be as cold as him, the laws of power with his face on the thumbnail, videos titled "Stop Talking" or "How to Seem Intelligent" with Ayanokoji as the cover. All that content wasn't being made by people who'd read the light novels. It was being made by people who watched a 15-second edit and immediately understood exactly what this character represented. That only happens to characters who become cultural icons. And in modern anime, that list is very short. To understand Ayanokoji's impact, you also have to understand the context he appeared in. When Classroom of the Elite came out in 2017, the majority of anime protagonists were still following pretty familiar patterns. Emotional, expressive characters with clear goals from episode 1, who shout their attacks, say exactly what they're thinking, and spell out what they want to achieve. The classic shonen formula that everyone knows. And it worked. It obviously still works today. But that formula was also starting to feel predictable. And then Ayanokoji showed up, a character who's emotionally hollow, who never reveals his plans, who doesn't shout or get visibly emotional, who manipulates everyone around him while appearing to do nothing. A protagonist who always knows exactly what's going to happen before it happens. That shift was massive. Going from characters who announce their goals in the first arc to someone you genuinely cannot read at all is a total change of paradigm. And it generated immediate fascination. It wasn't just that he was different. It's that he was different in a direction people had been waiting for someone to go. This is probably the most interesting part of the whole thing. Because you might think the appeal of Ayanokoji is simply that he's intelligent. But there are plenty of intelligent characters in anime. Light Yagami is intelligent. Lelouch is intelligent. Shikamaru is intelligent. What makes Ayanokoji different isn't the intelligence itself, it's what that intelligence represents. Ayanokoji embodies a very specific fantasy that a lot of people have but rarely see reflected in a protagonist, the fantasy of absolute control. The idea of walking into any situation and never losing your composure. Never showing weakness. Never revealing what you're actually thinking. While everyone else reacts emotionally, he observes everything from above, calculating every move with a calm that feels almost superhuman. And on the internet, in the era of social media and self-improvement content, that image hits differently. Because deep down, a lot of people feel like that's exactly what they're missing. Control. Self-sufficiency. The ability to not need anyone's approval, to not react impulsively, to always be one step ahead. And Ayanokoji has all of it. It doesn't matter who tries to manipulate him, it doesn't matter who holds the power in any given moment. In the end, he always proves he understood the situation from the very beginning. And that's the emotional core of the character. You don't become obsessed with Ayanokoji because you necessarily want to be him, although some people do, just like there's always someone who wants to become Naruto. What hooks you is the feeling that you could be him. That's the fantasy the series sells. That not revealing your plans, being more calculated, not showing your emotions are things you could actually do. You could be like that too. You just don't, because it's an incredibly lonely way to live, and the show makes sure you see that too, though we'll come back to that at the end. Something else that very few people say out loud but is completely real, Ayanokoji is probably one of the first major anime protagonists designed almost perfectly for social media culture. His scenes work incredibly well in short-form format. His cold expression, his way of speaking, that aura he carries when he's in the middle of manipulating someone, all of it is absurdly easy to make go viral. You don't need to have watched the anime for a 20-second clip to feel impressive. One well-directed scene or a single line is all it takes for the internet to do the rest. And that made the character transcend the anime itself by a huge margin. Because every time a new calculated, intelligent character appeared in some other show, the internet automatically started comparing them to Ayanokoji. He's good, but he doesn't reach Ayanokoji's level. Looked promising, but he's way more predictable than Ayanokoji. The character became a benchmark, the standard everyone else gets measured against. And achieving that is incredibly hard. Being popular while an anime is airing is one thing. Becoming a permanent part of modern anime culture is something else entirely. Ayanokoji managed to do exactly that. Now, having said all of that, we also have to be honest. Because Classroom of the Elite as an anime had problems. Problems the community itself acknowledged, but that often got pushed to the side because of how much weight the character carried on his own. One of the most repeated criticisms was that earlier seasons moved too fast, cut important scenes, or simply failed to transmit the psychological tension that actually exists in the light novels. And that matters because Ayanokoji is a character who depends enormously on direction. He doesn't need spectacular fights or visual explosions for his scenes to land. His strength is in the atmosphere, in the silences, in the way he watches other characters while processing everything in real time. When that falls flat, the character loses part of what makes him special. And in some seasons, that's exactly what happened. The character kept working thanks to the identity he'd already built, but the anime wasn't doing him justice. That's why the fourth season became such a big deal. From the very first episodes you could feel the difference in how it was being handled. More care in the animation, more impact in the key sequences, a better delivery of that feeling of absolute control that defines the character. And the internet reacted almost instantly. Ayanokoji never stopped being relevant, but the adaptation had stopped maximizing him for a while. With the fourth season, that changed. It wasn't just the anime coming back, it was the character returning in his full dimension. And here's the most interesting part of all. Because underneath all that perfect image, Ayanokoji is still a pretty emotionally empty character. He doesn't even seem to enjoy what he does. There's no celebration when he wins, no real satisfaction when he outmaneuvers someone. He just keeps moving forward, calculating the next step. The story constantly plays with the idea that his extreme intelligence also completely isolated him from other people. That the absolute control everyone admires comes at an enormous cost. Ayanokoji always wins, but he never seems truly happy or genuinely connected to anyone around him. And that's what makes this obsession fascinating on a level that goes beyond the anime. Because Ayanokoji represents something admirable and something pretty sad at the same time. He's the control fantasy, yes, but he's also the reminder of what that control actually costs. The life that everyone wants from the outside is, from the inside, profoundly lonely. And yet millions of people are still fascinated by him. Still making edits, still comparing other characters to him, still debating whether he's the greatest protagonist in modern anime. Because very few characters manage to do that. Stay relevant for this long. Generate conversation over and over again every time a new scene drops. Become a benchmark that others have to try to surpass. Classroom of the Elite went through a lot of phases. Better seasons and worse ones, criticism and moments of absolute hype. But Ayanokoji never disappeared. And in the modern anime industry, in the era of infinite content where trends last weeks, that says more than any ranking ever could.